One and talk.
Hello.
Okay, I see it. Good. What do you mean, hello? Don't do that. What's wrong with you? Don't give me a heart attack, please.
Hi, this is Tom Bergeron. You know what you're doing. You're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
When you're a kid and you see your heroes playing places, and then all of a sudden you find your big ass sitting on the stage, it's pretty emotional. It's fun. We're gonna royally rock this motherfucker this evening. You better believe that.
This is Geekcast Radio episode 306. I'm, of course, GCR Mike. Joining me once again for another Blackstone Cherry episode is my good friend in great music. It's Mr. Terry Smith from Music Talks Podcast. Hi, Terry. How are you? I know that's a loaded question at the current.
I am good, Mike. And as always, it's a delight to be talking to you.
Absolutely. Today, we're going to be reliving the concert that Blackstone Cherry did in London at the famous Royal Albert Hall, y'all. We'll get some facts on that in a little bit from Terry. But before we get all of that, if you marry, because Mike and Terry is marry, that's the only interesting way I can combine our names. Yeah. Facts for everyone. December 3rd of 2019 was my first episode of Music Talks Podcast, where Terry basically grilled me on my musical history. December 6th of 2019, I flipped the script on him and made him redo his episode of Music Talks Podcast here on Geekcast Radio. December 13th of 2019, I basically made his brain explode when I said I can take one band and put it from the 60s to today with Blackstone Cherry. December 6th of 2021, last year, we did the Human Condition album review. And now, October 7th of 2022, as I said, we're going to be discussing the DVD, the video performance that Blackstone Cherry did at the Royal Albert Hall in London. So we have done 5 podcasts in 3 years, Terry.
And clearly we should have waited till December because we always do them just before Christmas.
I know.
All right, I'll be back in 2 months.
Not after all the technical difficulties.
Oh, no. Don't. Yes, I know.
Yes. Yeah, this has all been amazing, and it's all thanks to Jesse, because like I said, Jesse was like, here, I'm going to invite you to like this. This was like a couple years ago now. I'll invite you to like this page. I'm like, okay, I'll like it, and then I'll listen to it. And I've listened to everything since.
Thank you.
Since I found it, and for those that don't know, Terry Smith is the creator and owner and everything with Music Talks Podcast, which was started June 25th, 2019. And as of this recording, he just released episode 77, parts 1 and 2 with Ian Rogers on September 22nd and 29th, respectively. You are technically 23 episodes away from Music Talks having 100 episodes. But enough about all that. We're here to talk about it live at the Royal Albert.
One way or another, Mike.
Well, you know, as someone who has reached that milestone on multiple podcasts, I can tell you it takes time, but you approach podcasting differently than I do. You and everyone else in the world approach it as a hobby, which is fine. I'm like, I am a machine. This is my job.
Yeah, I mean, you and Jesse just churn out a ridiculous amount of episodes, and now Jesse's decided, I know you already have multiple, he's decided he's going to have a John Hyatt podcast as well, so I just don't know how you do it, but yeah, I move a lot slower over here, Mike.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's okay. So the Blackstone Cherry Royal Albert Hall, y'all, this was their 2021 UK tour. They did Royal Albert Hall on September 29th of 2021. And the funny thing is, I remember when they announced this tour, the UK tour back in 2021, I messaged you and said, they're going to be in Glasgow on September 17th. You need to go.
I didn't. I wish I had.
But yeah, and I have actually seen them live once. It was on March 29th of 2018. Karen and I had gone, and we got to see at that time, they were just releasing Family Tree, the 6th album, I think. And we got to see the live debut of Bad Habit, the live debut of Burnin', and the live debut of Carry Me On Down the Road, plus other Blackstone Cherry hits. So that was awesome. But this Royal Albert Hall episode, wow. So you have some things you want to go through. So let's hit your bullet points, sir. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start, and then I can tell you about the Royal Albert Hall. So, obviously, it's been a big few weeks for the royal family in the UK.
Yes, it has.
With the passing of and I'm determined I won't turn this into a history lesson for your American listeners, not least of which I'm not great on British history. But it gets very complicated. So if I was in England, I would say the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Mm-hmm. I live in Scotland, and Scotland never recognised Queen Elizabeth I.
Oh, no.
So that is actually always a bone of contention. And you can tell who's got a Scottish background and who's got an English background, whether they use Elizabeth II. But the reality is, whatever you think of the royal family, we all loved Liz. As say, whatever you think of the monarchy, talk about dedication and service. So she was our queen for 70 years and 7 months, and became the longest serving, I think, actual female monarch in the world ever, but certainly the longest serving British monarch. And she beat Queen Victoria, who was on the throne for 63 years and 7 months, from 1837 just into the new century, then, or the 20th century, into 1901.
Wow. So
in a male-dominated world, it's ironic to think that, you know, for the past 100 and almost 200 years, our monarch's normally been a female, which is great. So Victoria was an interesting character. And, you know, the Victorian age is viewed as being very, I guess, probably the view of the British, and some ways justified, of very stitched up, very moral and all of that. But the irony is that she was madly in love with her husband. It was a great romance. And surprise, surprise, he was called Albert. So what is now the Royal Albert Hall was actually supposed to be the Central Hall of Arts and Sciences. But Queen Victoria laid the foundation stone in 1867. And of course, particularly in those days, being the Queen, she then said, you need to call this the Royal Albert Hall. Mm-hmm. And its full name to this day is the Royal Albert Hall of Arts and Sciences. So it's basically, it was a memorial to Albert, who was at a Prince consort, and it's part of a bigger, so if anybody ever visits the Albert Hall, then also there is the Albert Memorial in Kensington Gardens next door. So that whole thing was her basically saying, this is for my husband, who I love the bones of. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's called the Royal Albert Hall. It is run by a charity. It gets no government funding. And it its capacity is 5,272. And if people don't know about it, it's also round. Mm-hmm. And that is significant when we come to talk about music and who's played there and all of that. But there's the background on the hall.
All right, so let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Should it have government funding?
It's an I say it hasn't got government funding because I think the way it's viewed, certainly by the British population, so it is one of those, people get nostalgic about the Albert Hall even if they haven't been there. You know, the phrase iconic, I think, is overused these days, but it is iconic. You have something called the Proms in the summer, which is I think, month-long music festival, but classical music festival. It's run since 1941. It's always broadcast on the BBC. The last night of the Proms is a massive sing-along, and we'll keep coming back to this. The fact that the Albert Hall is round, it's really good for a sing-along.
Yeah,
it's not good for other things, but it's good for singing. So I think most people in the UK would be surprised that the Royal Albert Hall isn't government funded, but it doesn't need to be. I mean, it's successful. You know, it's always got events on. It's done a massive sort of refurbishment and modernization over the last 20, 25 years.
Yeah. And it's like Chris Robertson says in the performance, like, because they have these interstitials, because live at the Royal Albert Hall, y'all, plays like, even though it's a concert DVD, it plays like it's a movie with clips cut interstitially. And he says he doesn't get nervous in front of the stage. He's at home on the stage, but being at the Royal Albert Hall, it's just fucking overwhelming, like he says.
Well, and here's the thing about it. So, you know, if anybody is in London and visiting, and there is something on at the Albert Hall, you should go, because it is a unique building. It's the only venue that I've been to that does hold rock concerts that has that much red velvet. I mean, literally, there's booths all the way around. There's red velvet. You know, it's the most un-rock and roll venue there is. So here's my sort of travel advice, which is, if you're in town and you're visiting, then do this. One, if you happen to be driving, get there for 6 o'clock, because there's actually free parking after 6 around there, believe it or not, that part of London. 2, the Albert Hall now has a couple of restaurants, and given the venue that it is, they're actually remarkably good value. So it means you get in early, you can wander around. And I will tell you one story. We went to see Crowded House there.
Oh, wow.
So we arrive at 6 o'clock. We're walking along the corridors, which of course are circular. And suddenly we can hear music. So we stop and we go into we go through the red velvet curtains and into one of the booths, because of course it was originally set up for opera. And Crowded House are on stage doing their sound check. So we sat there for 20, 25 minutes and just watched them do their sound check from one of the booths, which was brilliant. And just to finish that story, it was actually the last night of their world tour. They've been touring for 18 months. Mm-hmm. And what they did on one song was they said, you know, we've had this road crew for 18 months and they've been fantastic and that. And what we saw in the sound check was some of the road crew playing. So they they started the song and then they invited the road crew on to take over. Mm-hmm. At which point they disappeared off stage. And at the end of the road crew playing the song, the spotlight then went on and they were sat up in one of the booths we'd been in. Which I thought was brilliant. It was brilliant. So yeah, it's a fascinating venue, but as I say, it's not very rock and roll, which was why I was surprised at Blackstone. But I get why people see it as such an iconic venue when you look at the number of live albums that have taken place and all of that. But
yeah, and you said it's just live at the Royal Albert Hall, y'all, is just one of 30 albums that were recorded.
Well, I got that data wrong because I've done more research. It's actually one of 55.
Oh, interesting.
And this is, I'm not going to read all 55, but how about this as some of the other people? Hendrix, The Who, Moody Blues, Adele, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Nick Cave, Paul Weller, twice, Joe Bonamassa, twice, The Killers, John Fogerty, Deep Purple, Cowboy Junkies, Supertramp, The Byrds, Cream, Frank Sinatra, George Michael, and Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Those are all bands that you wouldn't think all bands and artists that you wouldn't think go together, but because of what this building is, it brings people. It's just like, honestly, it's just like your podcast. You're bringing people together. You have people on Music Talks that tell their stories, and every story in all 77 episodes is so different.
Yeah. And it's just, as I say, it is iconic. And the thing is, if you look at the history of it in terms of bands playing there, so it really first became famous in the late 60s when the Cream live album was a real turning point.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, I mean, in the late 60s, Cream, Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, anybody who was anybody played the Albert Hall. And that hadn't happened before, and there was a couple of reasons for that. One, obviously, it was the late 60s where bands actually started to have at least something resembling a decent PA system, you know. But also, there was this big thing of it was 2 fingers up to the establishment. So how about this as an example, which is, this is in the wiki. One notable event was a Pink Floyd concert held on the 26th of June, 1969. That was the night they were banned forever from playing the hall after shooting cannons, nailing things to the stage, and having a man in a gorilla suit roam the audience.
It sounds like they filmed the movie Trading Places there, really, is what it sounds like.
And by the way, the irony is that Dave Gilmour's played the Albert Hall about 10 times since then, and I think he's actually also done a live album there. So it was very much about, this was rock music storming the bastion of the classical establishment. The other reason it started to happen in the late 60s, and specifically in 1969, is, and let me get my notes right, get my numbers right, but I think it was that they installed 135 mushrooms in the Albert Hall, because I mentioned that it's circular, it's round. Mm-hmm. So the line used to be, the great thing about hearing your music played at the Albert Hall is you get to hear it twice, because there was a massive echo in the dome.
Yep.
And I actually haven't gone back and rewatched the Blackstone Cherry to see if you can see, but if people look online, so literally in the dome, there was 135 mushrooms put in the late 60s. They then redid it in 2001, and they took 50 out and made the other 85 bigger. But they needed to, because basically if you put a rock band in there before 1969, all you got was a cacophony. Now, I have to say, to this day, the acoustics aren't brilliant.
Yeah, no, they aren't.
However, and this is a bit that confuses me about the DVD, the thing, I mentioned it before, the thing that is brilliant is when the audience sing, it's really loud.
Yeah.
And that doesn't come across in the DVD.
No.
Or on the album. So I think whoever, if I may, whoever mixed it wants shooting. Because that's the only thing that's missing for me is, and they do a great job of working the crowd.
Oh, yeah.
And then you hear, it's like, what?
What? Yeah.
Now, it might also be London audiences, because they don't sing as well as Scottish audiences. But
yeah, it's just one of those things where getting into the DVD, it's like Chris is just a great front man, and brilliant. he will basically take his own lines from White Trash Millionaire, count your cash and kiss my ass, and all that. And it's like, he's going to get them up, and like, he's just going to get them up and get them going. And whether you hear it or not in the mix or whatever, and you're right, because I've watched, since they released it this year, I think I've watched it like 10 times. Like, I just finished watching it right before this just to make sure I had it clear in my mind. And I have the album on Spotify, so I listen to a lot of the tracks just for the tracks themselves. But like watching the actual event, it's like, holy crap.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell you what I thought?
Yeah.
Well, before we do, just one final thing on the Albert Hall, by the way. Mm-hmm. And I probably missed him on that list, but somebody else who's done a live album is Clapton. And his live album was called 24 Nights, which was taken from 42 shows he did. Oh, because for years, early 90s and then the noughties, he would do like a season, and typically sort of January, February, he would do a season at the Royal Albert Hall. And the thing I loved was, and like each night would be different. He'd do a blues night and then he'd do a band night. But his great phrase was, my latest season in my North London sitting room. And seriously, if you went, that's how it felt, like, I mean, obviously he didn't have to sound check or anything because that was set up and he was doing 20 nights, and he'd like sort of wander in at 7:30, one stage, say, hi, This is what I'm going to play tonight. So that was good. But in terms of the DVD, here's the story, Mike, because obviously you were good enough to ask me to do this. And as you say, it's one of a sort of ongoing series.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks ago, Laura was over at her mum's, so I had the house to myself, I had the night to myself. And if I'm completely honest, and I thought, oh, that's when I'll watch the Blackstone Cherry DVD. Mm-hmm. I sat down and I thought, when was the last time I was able to do this?
Yeah.
And I then thought, with all respect, Mike, there's probably a dozen DVDs and streams that I'd rather be looking at tonight than Blackstone Cherry. However,
I don't think, but let me just interrupt really quickly. I don't think you listened to it, but the end of episode 303 with Jesse and I talking about Daryl Hall and John Oates' H2O album, because that album is about to turn 40 years old this year. At the end of the podcast, I said, coming up, and it didn't come up next because we're doing this now. We've had a couple episodes since episode 303, but I said, and coming up next, it's Terry Smith joining me once again to talk about Blackstone Cherry, something that he's told me is not really his thing, but because it's me, he'll do it anyway.
Well, you got it. You got it.
So I appreciate that.
I'm sat down on a Tuesday evening or whatever it was with a glass of wine thinking, let's do a list of things I'd actually like to be watching. I have to say, genuinely, and this is not because it's you, they won me over. And I'll tell you what was so many things. What was fascinating, and this only actually occurred to me a couple of days ago, was that I'm never sure that live DVDs really work. You know what I mean? In that we had it in lockdown. There's something strange about sitting in your living room watching. But typically the DVDs I watch or the streams I watch are artists I know really well that I love, and therefore you sort of know what you're going to get. Well, I didn't with this. So it was much more like a genuine concert experience.
Yeah.
And I use that phrase, they won me over, in the sense that, one, and hey, we all know it's a film and they're artists and they've got to portray an image and that. Mm-hmm. I get why you like them. I get why so many people like them. They just seem like a bunch of great guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they really do. I think, Chris, as you said, I think there's actually not that many people who can command a stage, who can work an audience and look comfortable doing it. Mm-hmm. And I think he does a great job of that. I think the guitarist is magnificent. Yep. There was so much energy. And again, I don't typically get that off a DVD. So, the words I wrote down was energy, authenticity, and the other thing I witter on to Laura, if she'll listen, is pacing. There's so many bands who don't know how to put a set list together.
Yeah.
And don't know how to keep a show moving.
Yeah.
There was light and shade in there.
Yeah.
So I have to say, I wish now it wouldn't have happened, because the other thing, and they reference it in the DVD, was, COVID was still a very real issue when they were touring.
Yes.
And by the way, Barrowlands it's a fantastic venue, but one of the reasons it's a fantastic venue is that the alcohol consumption per attendee is higher than any other venue in Britain. It's a 30s, basically used to be a massive dance hall, so the floor still bounces. Mm-hmm. So if you can, any band that plays there who's any good, basically you end up in this bouncing mosh pit, even if it's not a band that has a mosh pit.
If we got anybody in the pit, if you knock somebody down, please pick them up.
Yeah. But, next time they're touring, if they're playing Edinburgh or they're playing Barrowlands, I will probably get in my car and go and see them, because I thought they clearly put on a great show.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who has seen them live at Joe's Live Rosemont in Illinois, in 2018, that was the first concert I had been to in a long. I don't go to concerts. It's not one of the things that I do. It's not. And you and I kind of have the same feeling. We've, ever since we've started, talking, interacting, like we're not. Yes, we we believe in going to the event and experiencing it, but like you were saying earlier about the live DVD, about watching a live performance kind of thing, we're not those kind of people. We would rather hear the album version or whatever, because the live music experience should be experienced at that moment.
Yes.
However, I will say, I felt like I was there watching this. Every time I've watched this thing, I felt like I was in the audience, because these guys, and the band kind of has changed a little bit. So John Lawhon, who was the other bassist, he decided to retire or whatever, and now they have Steve Jewell Jr., which is awesome and great. But so it's changed a little bit, but overall you can tell that they're still doing what they've done on the albums, but they're doing it in a live setting and everything else. And what I noticed in this performance is, when I saw them live in 2018, I was focusing on Chris and I was focusing on John Fred Young, the drummer. But you can't help but focus on Ben Wells, because, man, that dude just bounces. He'll bounce from one side to the stage to the other side of the stage in like 10 seconds.
Yep.
But what I noticed here, and I don't always notice this in albums or in live recordings, I rarely notice the backing vocals. You always hear about, oh, this person did backing vocals on this, or this person. I actually heard, the first time I watched this, when it came out this year, I watched it, I sat down and I was watching it just to enjoy it, to, experience it and whatever else. I actually heard Ben Wells and I'm like, oh my God, it is obviously Chris Robertson, the lead singer, but I'm like, wow, I actually heard the backing vocals. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And, one of my standard lines about any great show is they weren't dialing it in.
Uh-huh.
Clearly, that is a band who love, and obviously there was the extra impetus if it was first tour back and all of that, but that's a band who love playing live. Now, they've obviously got a massive fan base in the UK, because there's a live album from Birmingham, isn't there?
Uh-huh, yep. That was a number of years ago, yeah.
And that's Birmingham, UK, not Birmingham, Alabama, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hadn't realized how big they were over here. But, yeah, I was, as I say, pleasantly surprised, and I was won over. So, thank you. It was, I had low expectations, and they were more than met. More than met.
So, what is the OVO Hydro?
Oh, so OVO is an energy company.
Okay.
And the Hydro is a venue that is, going back to the Albert Hall, ironically, is also circular.
Guess what? You got to go see Blackstone Cherry January 30th, 2023. It's a Monday night. They will be in Glasgow.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's a shame they're not playing Barrett. Well, but also that shows the popularity then, because Barrowlands, let me check, but I think Barrowlands will be just a couple of thousand.
If you don't mind, we like to introduce y'all to the human condition.
I mean, the other thing, while I'm looking for that, you need to know about Barrowlands is that it's in one of the rougher areas of Glasgow, and there is a Scottish performer called Katie Tunstall.
Uh-huh.
And we saw her not long before lockdown. Let's see what it says as capacity. Yeah, 1,900 Barrowlands, whereas the Hydro is 12,000.
Oh, wow.
So that's a big leap. But yeah, Katie Tunstall, when we saw her at Barrowlands, and she's a Scottish girl, she's a Glasgow girl, and she said, and Barrowlands have a look online, but it's got this great 30s, glitzy sign.
Yeah.
And she said it was fantastic this morning. She said, and she lives in the States now, she said, I wake up on the bus, I look out the left window, and there's the Barrowlands sign, and I'm thinking, I'm back home. Tonight we'll be playing my favorite venue in the world. She said, and I got that warm glow. She said, I then turned over, looked out the right window, and saw the equally large sign for the sex shop and thought, I'm back home.
So I am looking at the Hydro, and yeah, you guys got to go. They are 46.05 pounds per ticket.
All right, I will book my ticket. I suspect Laura will decline, but you have my commitment that I will be there. As long as they don't start doing dynamic pricing like Bruce, I'll be fine.
Oh God, that stupid ticket gate.
That's brilliant. I didn't realize. And seriously, I will go.
But yeah, Blackstone Cherry, Royal Albert Hall, y'all. It was so good, and every time I listen to it, it's like, or I watch it, it's like, it's just so good. And you see the story of them as kids, and you hear them talk about how, you know, they wanted to play this place since 2007, right after their debut album released, and all that. And it's just, and you know, it's like Chris says in the DVD, it's not if, but when.
Yep.
You know, and man, this is one hell of a concert. Even if you weren't there, just watching this, like I said, it makes you feel like you are there.
Yep. So what's your favorite songs? What's your favorite moments?
Oh God, there are too many. So normally I am not someone who does the whole like drum solo thing. Like, yes, I watched it. I saw John Fred's. I know how amazing John Fred Young is, but normally I'm not someone who is like, I want to hear the songs and whatever else. But when they did the second part on In My Blood, because what they did was they did In My Blood / Island Jam. Oh, I'm like, I'm not normally into reggae, but Blackstone Cherry, I'm telling you, this band, if they can cover Tracy Chapman,
yep,
you know, give me one reason. They can do anything. And it's like, oh wow, I'm digging this. I'm a crusty old white guy that doesn't have dreadlocks, but I feel like I have dreadlocks on my head as I'm listening to that island part at the end of the song. I love like you said, the way they transition, and when they did Cheaper to Drink Alone, that's the point where they introduce the band, and it's just so fun.
I agree. And you know, it goes back to, again, Chris being a great frontman. Band introductions can be a real pain, or they can be great fun if you're there, but watching it again and listening back, you go, he does a great job. That was one of the highlights for me, I have to say.
Now if you don't mind, we want to take a second here, get to know each other a little bit better, right? So ladies and gentlemen, on my right, playing the guitar, wearing that scarf, singing his ass off for you, all the way from Glasgow, Kentucky, baby. My brother, your best friend, the one and only, Mr. Benjamin Daniel. Now, to my left, the newest face, the newest member of Blackstone Cherry, ladies and gentlemen. So when I introduce him, I want one big ass Royal Albert Hall welcome for him, all right? Hailing from Horse Cave, Kentucky. Our little brother from another mother, baby, Mr. Steve Joe Jr. Mr. Steve Joe Jr., baby. Now, the man helping us out back here from time to time tonight, all right? Drum tech, percussionist extraordinary, in case you didn't know, world famous movie actor, baby. Concerned on looking up at you himself, I salute you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would, put your hands together like this right here. I want y'all to be a part of the band with us right here, right now. We need y'all to keep that going. Everybody in the room, come on. We're going to create a little bit of space and then let Sir Johnny take over the place. Mr. Jeffrey, by go, bye! Now the man in the back, I want to tell you a little funny story real quick, all right? We was about 12 years old. I brought this shit up to John Fred today. It was 7th grade. John Fred played a talent show at the end of the school year. And I can firmly stand here today and say, had he not played that talent show and brought his drums, Blackstone Cherry wouldn't be here today, man. Because at that same day, I looked at John Fred and said, man, let's start a band. Let's see what happens. And now we're here. Now what I want, when we come back into this thing, because we a hell of a long way from that middle school gym right now, I'm going to say his name, and I want everybody in this room to scream it with me, because the more you give him, the more he's going to give you right back, all right? And it shouldn't be hard. I bet he's the only person in the room with 2 first names, all right? So, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, lend your ear to Mr. John Fred. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Robinson. We are Blackstone Cherry, and it is an absolute honor to be here with you this evening, all right?
I also, being the soppy sentimentalist I am, I love the things my father said into In Love with the Pain.
Yep.
For all sorts of reasons. I love the contrast. And again, I think it takes real talent and real balls to stand in front of 5,000 people and sing a song like that. So, I thought that was great.
Yeah, at the time they did this, because like I said, they were at Royal Albert September 29th of 2021. His dad just passed on June 30th of that year, and he brought the guitar that his dad and everything else and all. And but he says in the DVD that song means he never knew what it meant to him until obviously now. And with me, like, it doesn't really apply, but there are certain lines and things my father said that I kind of what happened?
No, I was saying absolutely that there's connections.
Yeah, there are certain lines in that song that even though it's about his dad, it's like, the last goodbye part, it's like, oh God, because I lost Karen in 2021. And it's like, I mean, the song is already emotional. The song is already going to get you thinking about your father or whatever, and you're going to cry anyway. It's an emotional song, and it just makes you think. And you're right. He's like, at the end of it, he's like, he's like, oh, my dad would be like, quit the crying, get to back playing rock and roll. And he just rolls right into In Love with the Pain. And one of the reasons why I love In Love with the Pain is because it reminds me so much of Massachusetts, because that's where they filmed the video. So, and me being originally from Massachusetts, like, I don't even remember the last time I was home was 2012. So it's been a decade since I've ever set foot in Massachusetts. The last time was December 4th of 2012. And it's just so good. And the way that they mixed this set list, it just flows.
No, I agree. Great job. So I scored it.
Okay.
Because I love your scoring system. I think that's great. And I'm a hard marker, as you know. So I scored it a 4.
Uh-huh.
And the only things I would change, one is, in all seriousness, remix the audience and get them louder, because they look on the DVD like they're having a great time. It just doesn't sound like they are.
Yeah.
And also, you asked about fans and that. I thought it was good. I thought the fan interviews were good. I actually think they could have had short, like little sound bites from more fans.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's something different. It's the variation of songs. It's not all the same. It's not always bang bang bang. And there's a lot of soul and heart and soul that goes into the music. It just mixes it up, so you can go through the emotions. You can rock out, and then you can next minute you're crying your eyes out. Because I think it's because it's from the heart, and they've had the same experience as I've had, especially Chris and his experiences. And to actually write about them is amazing, and to admit them. That's the first thing. People don't like to admit things. There's loads of genuine bands out there now, but they tend to be more the smaller venues. And I don't know if it's a thing about once they get to a certain level of, we've made it type of thing. But when they're small bands like those Damn Crows, people like that, they hang around the merch. But when they get to a certain level or certain fame, they seem to stop doing that. Whereas these guys, they're always available every show.
But overall, I thought it was really good, and I may even watch it again. If I was still doing my flying around the world, it would definitely be on my PC to watch on a flight.
Yeah, my wings get tired when I fly. Yeah, it's too much work. But yeah, a little bit better mixing on the crowd. But again, like I said, that moment when Chris is like, this is I have to put my guitar down every single night. And, he goes and he gets them up, even though you can't really hear it.
Now I want to try to have a little bit of fun with you, all right? I'm going to sing something, and then I want everybody in this room to sing it back to me, all right? Listen here. Right back. Hey. Well. Y'all make me put my guitar down every damn night.
You can see it in his reaction to what they are doing.
Absolutely.
And yeah, anyone and I understand they only focused on a couple of people with the fan thing, but Duncan's story about, he was a taxi operator and was locked down and with whatever. And what he says in the fan, as he's talking, he's like, they're just a band that bring people together. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be up and rocking with the person next to you, and the next thing you know, like he said, when they play Things My Father Said, you're going to look over your other shoulder, and there's going to be somebody else you don't even know that's crying just like you are, because Blackstone Cherry, it's like in the official group, we always say, Cherry heads unite, and we're just all united around this band because they put so much good vibes into everything they do. Yeah,
and that comes across.
Absolutely. For me, I see what you're saying about the mix, and I do agree. So I was just going to give it a blanket 5 on the GCRN rating scale because I love it so much.
It's your show, Mike.
I will give it a 4.5 because it's a half point off, but it's so good. It's like I said, I don't normally listen to live tracks on Spotify. I have, let me see if it's pulled up. I have like 4 of them in here. Out of it, yeah. I have In My Blood, Ringing in My Head, Cheaper to Drink Alone, Things My Father Said, which I probably should take out of there, but In Love with the Pain and White Trash Millionaire. Like, I listen to those all the time. I listen to that live version of In My Blood all the time.
Right. I will add that to my list as well.
And it's just, I don't know. I mean, these people do so much for their fans, and their fans do so much for them. It's like this mutual thing. And you see that with a lot of other artists and bands and everything else, but I don't think I've seen it the way that it's done with Blackstone.
No, there's a real connection there that you can see. And I didn't get the impression that there was some marketing person in the background telling them what to do.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, they are on their record label, but, it's like they put the record out in 2020, and that's all well and good. And the tour, they're doing their stuff and they're doing whatever. The other thing I want to mention really quickly before we kind of close this out is that seeing how each of them react, each of the band members, like I already mentioned with Chris sitting there, it's just fucking overwhelming. With Ben talking about the pressure of them, the crew, the audio, all the, of this being, I think he said at the time it was one of the first bands to do a UK tour because of lockdown and everything else. Yep. And you just see them and you see them talking and you hear what they're saying. And it's like, it's so good because they each had, like John Fred Young, it's like, he's coming in there. He's the kick-ass drummer. Steve Jewell Jr., he's the brand new guy, and, he's just all excited to be in with this band that has been around for over 20 years at this point. And it's just fun seeing their perspective. And like when John Fred walks in, he's like, "Oh, I'm with the band," and you see the camera.
Yeah, I love that moment. That was great.
Yeah. Well, you see as he's walking in, you see him walking up the stairs, and then it kind of transitions to Ben, but the camera pans over the ceiling of. There have only been, and I'm sure there are plenty of other places that I just haven't seen. There have only been 2 places in my lifetime that I have seen that are that amazing. Obviously, Royal Albert. There's another place called the Palace in Louisville, Kentucky, that kind of has that same feel of design and of things and everything else. And it's
also
so cool.
the thing that, when he walks down those corridors, and I should have mentioned earlier, is we talked about the live albums, but everybody has played the Royal Albert Hall. So as you walk along the corridor, it's just covered in pictures of who's played there. So, but that moment, and I did have a guest recently who sort of late in life got involved in the music industry, and he said, there's that fantastic moment where you turn up and you go, "I'm with the band." Now, God knows what it feels like when you went, "I'm in the band." But that's a special moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, really is. All right. Is there anything else we want to say about this performance or about the band or anything?
No, other than, if anybody's listening and they're not a Blackstone Cherry fan, give it a go. Because as I say, I was, and I don't mean it patronizing, I was really pleasantly surprised. I will go in January. And I think you've got to love any band who are that committed to live music and also to their fans. So it gave me a nice warm feeling, Mike. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we're going to go to a quick ad break, I think. I don't know, but we'll be back after this.
Yeah, man.
Hi, I'm Terry Smith, the host of Music Talks, the podcast where I ask guests a simple but beguiling question. Choose a song from each decade of your life and tell me why these songs mean so much to you. Guests and listeners love this format, and if you want to find out why, then take a listen at musictalkspod.buzzsprout.com or use your favourite podcast app. Just search on Music Talks Terry Smith. If you'd like to be a guest on the show and
Talk to me until I'm over.
then send me a tweet at Music Talks Pod. I look forward to doing some music talking soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, we are back here on Geekcast Radio with Mr. Terry Smith from Music Talks Podcast, Blackstone Cherry, live at the Royal Albert Hall. Y'all, go watch it. Go listen to it. Do what you got to do. Get into Blackstone Cherry because they are amazing. Terry, what has recently aired on Music Talks Podcast, and who have you got coming up?
Okay, so a couple of things I'm pointing people at. One is I did what I called a milestone compilation about a month ago. So we'd hit episode 75, we'd hit a download target and that. But, normally I have a guest who obviously chooses a song from each decade of their life. Milestone compilation, I have a different guest for each decade. So if anyone's not listened and would like a feel for what they might get, that's a great starting point. And then the current episode is a 2-parter with a guy called Ian Rogers. Ian spent a lot of his career around technology and was a real leader around music on the internet and streaming. He's also brilliant at name dropping, but he has worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. And I think he's got a fascinating story. So do try and take a listen to that. And then coming up, our good friend Jesse, another introduction from Jesse. So a guy called Michael Elliott, who has a fascinating life story, and also late in life has also become the author of genuinely a critically acclaimed biography on John Hyatt called Have a Little Faith. So that will be coming out in about 10 days' time. And then following that, I've got a guy called Jeff Sutton, who I worked with at Microsoft. But for the 20 years before he joined Microsoft, Jeff was a journalist on basically every major tabloid in the UK. So the Sun, the Daily Mail, the Mirror, and a host of fascinating stories, including a story about chasing Madonna around Hyde Park, which is a nice connection back to the Royal Albert Hall and all of that. By the way, he was chasing her to get a picture, and this was in the 80s, and it became a famous picture. But
yes,
watch out for that one.
Yeah, you don't want to chase stars and people and
well, it was different in the 80s.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, okay,
no one has guns in London.
Yeah.
Well, except maybe Madonna's security.
You never know. And the funny thing is like I say this a lot, and I'm surprised no one's stolen the idea from me, and it's fine. But like, I want to collaborate with someone where basically we take everything with the internet now, but it starts in 1982, and see how forward we get to 2022. If we had the internet in the 80s, folks, it would be just, I don't even know. We probably wouldn't have a world right now if we had the internet.
Yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole to go down. But I do like the fact that Ian Rogers in the latest episode, he talks about Sly Stone, who sadly did, to quote Ian's line, drove off the cliff basically. But he does say, thank goodness Sly Stone didn't have Twitter, because God knows what he would have been raging about. But I'm playing in my head what you just suggested, so that will take up my afternoon now.
Oh, good. That means after I stop the recording, folks, Terry and I are going to go through and figure out this.
I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there.
Oh, yeah. We're going to figure this out. All right, folks. That's going to do it for us here on Geekcast Radio. I hope you enjoyed the Blackstone Cherry Live at Royal Albert Hall discussion that Terry and I just had. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to get in contact with us to leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can listen to and comment on all of our content. You can also head over to musictalkspod.com. Is that the current?
That is the current. Or you can, if you want to do, going back to 80s and 90s, if you want to do 90s email, drop me a line at musictalkspod@outlook.com. And it's also on Facebook at Music Talks Pod.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will have all Terry's links in the show notes on the website. You can find us on Spotify and any other podcatching client you choose to use. We're on Twitter at Geekcast Radio. I'm at TFG and Mike. You can also check out Music Talks Pod on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff. We are Geekcast Radio Network on Facebook. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Geekcast Radio. Wish you'll join us next time, as I'll be talking about something with somebody. I don't have anything planned yet. Well, just for your for you, Terry, Geekcast Radio is the overall network show. We generally do big things here. We do we're gonna give a history of the last 80 years of Batman or whatever, kind of like it's an overall. And we don't normally, but lately I've been doing multiple episodes on multiple. Like I've been doing a couple of friends have done convention recaps of conventions that they've been to, like Emerald City and things like that. And it's like, I don't have a plan yet. I haven't come up with a plan yet for this. So
I think with everything that's going on, Mike, not having a plan is a great plan. Seriously. That's why I was laughing. I think that's a great thing.
This is very true. So for now, I am TFG and Mike with
Terry Smith.
Thank you for listening. Until next time, unleash the geek in you.
I wish I had something really cool to say, but from the bottom of our hearts, for allowing this to happen and going through anything you had to do to come in these doors tonight, thank you from Blackstone Cherry. I mean that shit, all right?
I am just this marvellous guy who lives in Scotland and does this podcast stuff and loves his music, and I'm married to Laura and I've got 2 great dogs.